Ejike, you're welcome. Let's take your comments on the war and the behavior, or what might happen now since after the death of the Supreme Leader and his replacement.
Yeah, well, there's a state, it's in a state of flux. Anything is possible right now. I think uncertainty is the word. Not even the American, the Israel, who struck Iran, can exactly tell you what is going to happen. And part of it, again, part of the reason for that is that, for instance, President Donald Trump, the U.S. president, issued a statement after the strike calling on the Iranians to take their destiny in their hands. That means that the situation, power is still out there on the streets. Of course, the regime will try to consolidate on power, will try to take back power. And they have started that process by appointing, according to the Iranian law, a three-man committee to steer the country ahead the next few days and months, pending the decision by the parliament later. So it's still a very flux, situation. Of course, you know that the Americans and the Israelis are still bombing parts of Iran. So it's a moment of tension. Of course, we also know that civilians in Iran, we've had it's a mixed emotion, really. You have a lot of Iranians celebrating the death of Ayatollah Khamenei and what has happened and the possible collapse of the regime, while you have others that are mourning. And then the Iranian state has promised reprisal attacks, and we can see these attacks, being carried out not just in Israel and America, the American targets inside countries in the Middle East, but other countries have been, attacked. Airports have been bombed, and all that. Even though the attacks have not been very precise in terms of the number of casualties, so there have been very, very few, casualties. Their bombs, obviously, have range, but do not have the lack of precision. And so the situation is still moving and can move in any, direction. We don't know. It could appear that the Americans and the Israelis will just stop short at bombing. Iran. Obviously, there is no possibility of moving in ground troops to, overthrow the Iranian regime. That again could escalate the situation and then be very, and lead to crisis even within Israel and America itself if they begin to suffer casualties, just like what we saw in Iran when the Americans had to turn tail after the series of deadly killings of American troops in that particular region. So it's still a very volatile situation, and if the regime is able to consolidate, then obviously it would appear that they might have to visit their wrath on some of those people who have been celebrating the killing of the Ayatollah.
Yeah, Chude, it would seem like the Americans didn't expect this kind of retaliation, because whether you like it or not, it's the first time that a country has been able to strike more than 5 other countries at the same time during an instance like this. But let's come to Ejike. Ejike is back with us. Ejike, let's ask this now. Given that Iran has already launched retaliatory attacks following the strike that killed the Supreme Leader, how might Iran's immediate military response and also broader strategic recalibration affect the U.S. strategy right now, the U.S.-Israel strategy?
Well, look, Iran is fighting like a wounded lion. They have nothing, it is telling that within hours, the Supreme Leader was killed. And if you look at, Gaddafi took a longer time. If you look at Saddam Hussein, these people get on the war stage and they beat their chest and they make noise. At the end of the day, we find out they are just a bunch of balloons. When you puncture them, they get deflected. I'm hoping that the Iranians step forward and look themselves in the eyes and begin to live like a nation that has the capacity, and not a nation that is, thumbing their finger at everybody else. At the end of the day, they're the ones whose blood are being shed. It's their country that is being destroyed. Whether Israeli and America, goes with some scratches on them, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that, like you guys say in Nigeria, power pass power. People talk about international law and all that stuff. We knew about the international law. America decided to do it in collaboration with Israel. end of story. Like we say in Texas, and especially in West Texas, it's bad weather. Sit back and enjoy it. What are you going to do about it? Everybody's going to have an outcry. UN is going to respond, and sympathizers are going to respond. At the end of the day, I've always said leaders of every country owed responsibility first to their people, and not to do things that invite military intervention. Today is a new day. Let's see what happens. But the guy is dead, and members of his family are dead. And
Ejike, and this question is for both you and Chude here. Let's take a look at the intent. Let's take a look at the strategy and how it's playing out currently. You mentioned two countries there. You mentioned, I think, Iraq and did you mention Libya? I'm not sure, but we've seen this play.
Gaddafi when Gaddafi was
Libya.
Taken out.
Good. So we've seen this play out before, where a country goes in, tries to liberate the people, but then leaves them worse off. I mean, Libya is not what it should have been today. It's not what they thought was going to happen. The intent for America was simple. Let's go in there, destabilize, and perhaps maybe they'll be able to rebuild. But we have seen from patterns that this is not the case. There has been no communication, or at least a relationship between America and any dissenting body inside of Iran. Not even up until today. The call out by the president for the Iranians to take over their government was not to any specific bodies. So who could come up as a body, a dissenting body that could achieve this? Chude, let me hear from you first.
Well, first of all, it's very clear that this is something that should have been avoided, would have been avoided. And I think I would agree with Ejike and his surmise about, you also have to understand the nature of the balance for power. You also have to understand, it was Jesus that said that when a person wants to go to war, a leader wants to go to war, he first takes count of what he has on ground, how many troops he has, how many soldiers he has, and all that. And if he realizes that with the 5,000 soldiers that he has, he might not be able to defeat the 10,000 soldiers that his opponent has, he should, before they set out for the war, he should send emissaries to go and talk peace. Yes, already they're already having talking peace. But last summer, I should have told the Iranians that they do not have what it takes. With the first wave of bombings by the Americans and then the Israelis, what the Iranians did was just very puny response to the attacks on Iran, especially when they hit their nuclear power plants and all that. So they should have known that they were in no position to engage with a country like the United States, most especially the United States, now in combination with Israel. And then you have also seen that what also made Iran more vulnerable is the fact that systematically, between the America and Israel, they had taken out their proxies or decapitated their ability to cause a problem, in the Middle East. They had almost, they have whittled down mightily the power and the influence of Hamas in Gaza. They have, then they have, of course, the formidable might of Hezbollah, in Lebanon, is it southern Lebanon? They had also decapitated, killed the leadership of Hezbollah, the leader of Hezbollah, and then other, leaders of Hezbollah, and then decapitated that organization. In Syria, their ally, the former Syrian President al-Assad, had, gone into hiding. In Yemen, it is the same thing. So they really had nothing. So it's like Iran was the head, and then all these other proxies were the arms and the limbs and the legs. And so they really had nothing to fight with. So why go into this kind of crisis when you know that the match is completely an uneven match and you're going to lose in the end? America had made it very clear from the beginning that they will never allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. And that is just the issue. And it's not just Iran. What is the relationship between Iran and other countries in the Middle East, the moderate countries, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and all that? Most of the relationship with most of these countries is a very hostile one, is an uneasy relationship. So why would they allow themselves, when they got into negotiations with the Iranians, with the Americans, one would have expected, even if you have to bite the bullet, even if you have to face the humiliation of not doing what you wanted to do, but political expediency what you did not want to do. Political expediency would have dictated that this is not the time. You do not have the means to actually say no, and you try to get out the best terms under the circumstances. They did not do that. So you now have a situation where now they find themselves at the receiving end. They have nothing to fall back on. The issue, of course, I think when you talk about the power play right now in Iran, and that goes to the heart of your question, the remnants of the followers of, obviously Khamenei and his people, and then even the regime itself is still intact. Perhaps not the exact leadership structure that has been decapitated to a very large level, but three members of this, successor committee that will run the government, the National Assembly decides on what to do, State Assembly, are already in place. The soldiers who, might still be loyal, to the Iranian, to this regime. And I think that is what matters at this particular point in time. Since there will not be any ground invasion, it would appear that the regime would have a way to reinvent himself, at least in the immediate future. So a lot is now left for them to also look at what you call real politics under the circumstances. Where are we? Where do we stand? Do we have what it takes to continue to defy America, most especially America? America, not even Israel, because Israel will go the way America, goes ultimately at the end of the day. So how do we appease America? How do we save our nation from further bombardments? This is not about braggadocio, trying to show your might. You don't really have a might when you're talking about confronting the greatest military power in the world for now at this particular point in time. It's foolhardiness. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense. And that has caused them the rise of their leadership.
Well, Chude, you might say so, but some people argue that Tehran does have the might. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, I'd like Ejike to tell me something about what he thought about the warning that came from General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He warned President Trump about the fact that the American army might sustain they are at risk significantly, especially if the war was to go longer than expected. When we get back, let's see if we think that war is going to go longer than, 3 days, as most people had put that it was going to end. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're still talking matters from inside of the Middle East as war rages on between America, Iran, and of course, Israel. Now, we have with us discussing this Ejike Okpa, who is in Texas, and of course, Ejike Chude, who's joining us as well via Zoom. Gentlemen, we were speaking from before regarding the issues, the situation. Let's talk about the fact that the U.S. president does not have the sole responsibility or right to actually declare war. He actually needs congressional permission to be able to do that. In this case, he did not take that permission from Congress. It wouldn't be the first time as U.S. presidents have been known to do this, and they do have that responsibility as chief of staff. But he was warned by General Dan Kane about the consequences if this war was to stretch. Now, shouldn't the risk of losing U.S. lives, soldiers like we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan, have been, further reasons to perhaps maybe rethink this course? Ejike, let's hear from you.
Hey, I want to correct something you said. The chairman didn't warn the president. You can't warn the commander-in-chief. What you do, you issue an advisory. Okay, I said, if we go forward, this may happen. So in terms of, the president, going to Congress, this is no war. No war has been declared. This is an airstrike. There were not an American, soldiers on the ground. It is only when you have your soldiers, there's a foot in the ground that then you can start to say it's a war. This is an airstrike, just like what happened in Nigeria. They came in, they did what they did, and they turned around and they flew back. So the thing is, we have to recognize this stuff. This is not the first time. It's very unfortunate with Trump, do what Trump does. Those who don't like him, just jump up. Obama did it. Bush did it. Go way back. Again, if you want to get an idea how America does what America does. Read the book called Overthrow. You know, before they didn't even have to get to the president to do these things. It was just the Secretary of State and a few people in the cabinet get together and say, you are out and you get out. So, but the thing is, I've always said, you know, like, Igbo people say, Ana mama before I pour easy, you know, look good from inside. Take care of your own people. That has always been, my motto, my mantra. Forget all this, getting on the square and dancing and exposing yourself. At the end of the day, you have nothing. If you take care of your people as the president or the prime minister, your people will rally for you. You know, you see what is going on in most of these countries. They're the ones that instigate America to come in. Whether America comes in and, things they fall apart, it's your responsibility. If somebody comes into your home and helps you clean it out, it is your responsibility to do something after the fact. And i.e., after the fact is take up the responsibility. I don't know why it is so difficult. You come into my home, you take my wife, it is not, I will not blame you, the outsider. I'll blame myself to having created the condition that enabled you to come into my house to do it. That is the first, that's what they call self-preservation is the first order of business. Most leaders don't have it. They put up their, family out there. They do all the showmanship. At the end of the day, like we said, Igbo people say, there's nothing there. Begin to have substance, not show. Leadership is about substance. Look at your people, like Chude said, before you go beating your chest, I'm going to do, make sure you have what it takes to take the fight. It's like going to fight with a gun when the other guy has AK-47. Who's going to win?
Ejike, it's not a question of whether America has the might or whether it doesn't. We are aware that they do. But the warning came because some of their fleet, the armadas, had been at sail for over 240 days from before. Now, deploying them to Iran was a stretch. And these warnings came, although he denied that there was no congressional warning. But let's put that aside. Let's take a look at the international perception that it gives now. If you undermine your institutions that are put in place to actually safeguard your nation, your lives, the lives of your soldiers, doesn't that reduce the trust that we'd have in the American military? Let's have Trudy here.
Well, it depends on how you look at it, and that's the reality. You undermine it because you yourself, you just indicated that virtually, many American presidents have acted,
and it didn't turn out well. It didn't turn out well in those instances as well.
No, it depends. It depends on the nature of such attacks. And just like Ejike has tried to say, this is not a war. It is like, what we have in Nigeria here, when you talk about the header, farmer conflict, and people have corrected that over time. I say, no, it is not header farmer conflict. Because if one side is carrying hoes and cutlasses, for hewing grass, for cutting grass and the rest, the other one is carrying an AK-47. It cannot be a clash because one side does not stand a chance, and so they don't aggress the other side. And that's just the reality. So these are airstrikes. These are airstrikes. And I'm not sure that when it comes to airstrikes, that the wording of the law from the United States Congress does not authorize presidents to carry out airstrikes outside of their country. And so you can see for Bill Clinton attacked Sudan. He sent bombs into Sudan. Obama sent bombs into different countries when he was president, including the no-fly zone. Of course, the intervention, some of these interventions are not all God well, depending on the nature and character of the interventions. That this is where I wanted to draw the line. So we cannot talk about, for instance, the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War. These are military battles that took place. These are wars. And for that you need, congressional approval for those things, and they did get congressional approvals when it got to that scale. For the attack on Libya, the imposition of no-fly zone by NATO countries, I'm not exactly sure that they got that, And then, of course, we saw what happened in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, there was a congressional approval. Don't forget that Afghanistan was a flow, from the World Trade Center bombing, and all Americans were agreed that then America needed to go after the people responsible for that. And so, again, even in the United States, it's not every American that is that is in opposition to what has just happened in Iran. There are some Americans that are in agreement, but you also have to look at the bottom line. Of course, when it comes to the breaking of international law, America and Israel are guilty of that. There is no doubt about that. But then, people talk about the rules-based order. The rules-based order, they say that is the way to go.
I'm sorry, I've been trying to wrap my mind around this. Now, when does an intervention become war? If you have retaliation, then that means you are at war. If two nations are going at each other with bombs, drones, that is war, isn't it? When does it become war from intervention or airstrikes, like you've noted?
Why is it that the two most antagonistic countries in the world, America and then Russia, that they've not fought themselves? Instead, they fight themselves using proxies, either in Angola, under UNITA of Savimbi and the MPLA. Or in Latin America, it is the same thing, either with the Sandinista forces and the rest. So they make sure that they use proxies. Real war, they have always avoided that because of what you call mutually assured destruction, MAD. They both have the capabilities. The Americans will think twice going to bomb China or going to bomb Russia, because the price will be devastating for the United States. I'm not saying that they will beat the United States, but they will pay a price, so they avoid it. For Iran, you cannot really call it a war because the military capabilities are not exactly the same. That of Iran is totally outmatched, and that's why when they attacked Iran last year, destroyed the nuclear facilities in about 2 or 3 nuclear sites. What did Iran do? They just did sporadic, bombing that eventually, at best, maybe killed about 3 or 4 Israelis and all that. And so it's not a match, it's an uneven fight. A fight between a professional wrestler, maybe, and a woman or an ordinary person. Okay. You cannot say it actually both of them fought themselves.
All right, then, Chude. Now, Ejike, let's talk about what this war is really about. Nobody's really talking about the fact that this is an energies war. We all know what happened in Venezuela. The fact that America went into Venezuela and took their president has stalled processes when it comes to Venezuela and China. Now, China only looked towards Iran for more energy, which is oil. Now Iran is under fire. That means that has come into, disarray. So are we calling it what it is? If you say that America cannot attack China, then is it doing this? Is this a proxy war where it's actually trying to affect China's energies so that it would weaken China? And then we'll talk about the implications for Africa. But Ejike, please, let's hear you on this.
I get tickled, when people talk about China, Russia, the BRICS. I'm saying if China had intelligence, if the source of their energy is Venezuela and the source of their energy is Iran, and then those two sources, get crippled, what did they do? How come they didn't get in front of it? Well, how come they didn't have their military resources in those places to prevent America from doing it? So this is what, I keep saying, don't celebrate shows, celebrate substance. And substance is actually when the push comes to the shove. Let's see who's going to, keep standing. So I don't know whether it's energy, I don't know what it is, but again, people talk about, the reserve in the ground, Venezuela has more, Iran has more. What they produce, what those two countries produce is not even up to what Texas produces. Okay, just do the number. It's like Nigeria say, we have water, but you have no water system. Okay, you have water supply. You don't have a water system.
Do you think America's oil reserves can survive if this war goes longer than it's supposed to? Because let's face it, America.
When you look at who produces the most oil in the world, it's still America.
It is still America, but currently they are dipping into their reserves now. They're already doing that.
Again, what is I live here? I've been living here since '87. I still go to my gas pump. It's not like 1973 when we had crisis. We've been able to, solve that strategic stuff. What I'm just saying, you look at Texas alone, about 5.something million barrels. If you combine what Nigeria does, Iran and Venezuela, it's not even up to what Texas does. My point is, let us not just stretch this argument about oil or no oil. America is a resilient country. We can always find out how to make it work for us. I'm just hoping that other countries can have the will to copy and paste. At the end of the day, it is what, we say in Texas all the time, are you bringing home the bacon? What are you bringing home?
Let's talk
it's
about
not
copy
just
and
going
paste.
out there.
Let's talk about copy and paste. And Judy, if you can join me here. Now, the copy and paste pattern is something that America has been known for, whether you like it or not. People are suspicious about whatever move they make. And Trump doesn't just make any ordinary move. He's very strategic. He's brilliant. He's intelligent, almost like a college professor. However, the question is, when it comes to his interest in Africa, especially here in Nigeria, how can we put two and two together using that copy and paste concept here? He doesn't just take interest in countries just for nothing. There has to be something that he could get back. Why is he interested in Nigeria at a time where shortly after he has ordered airstrikes in Nigeria, gone after Iran, who are oil-producing nations themselves? Remember, Nigeria is Africa's biggest oil-producing nation. So what relationships can we draw there when we look at the geopolitical chart?
Yes, let me just say, in answering that, I think it's connected the last question you asked and the responses and all that. And
Indeed.
then, the reality is that, look at Trump's mantra, America first. America first, people should understand or ask themselves, what exactly does it mean about America first? America first, above African interest, above European interest, above Russian, Chinese interest and all that. So whatever it is that will bring desired dividends or results for the United States, he's ready to do that. And of course, at the back of, their minds, it is very clear that the resources, energy resources in Venezuela was also a target. In the sense that some of this, don't forget that, if you look according to the Monroe Doctrine, all those countries within the Western Hemisphere, within Latin America as areas of spheres of influence for the United States. And so they want other countries to stay clear of their sphere of influence. And so for Venezuela, a neighboring country within the same hemisphere, to be selling, scarce resources to, peer rivals, Russia and China, was something that they couldn't, stomach. So embedded in their plan to invade Iran was not just about democracy, but also to stop the energy supplies to China and Russia. Not essential that because they wanted to take it themselves. Of course, they will have an arrangement, more or less. It is the same thing with Iran. Right now, if the pro-American forces on ground, for instance, have a more, managed to take over Iran, obviously they are going to tilt towards United States. And then the benefits China has been deriving from, oil and other, relationships, including Russia, will obviously come to an end. So there's a struggle for energy globally. There's no doubt about that. And I think, and in the African context, we should also look at it and not rule that out. Yes, there is the issue of killings in Nigeria from a perspective. But did they build the narrative in order to justify what they want to do in Nigeria or not? That's a different, question. But we know that regardless of what the government says here, that some of the security, breach in security across the country has been going on unabatedly for quite some time. Okay. So there's also, and of course, that some of these mines in the north, especially in the north, that are being mined all the time. Where are these things going to? They are definitely not going to the United States. So most likely, like some people have indicated, they are going to China. Mm-hmm. So any attempt to stop that from, helping a peer rival to the United States, I think they would, do that. But then the truth of the killings in Nigeria are also true. And so if America, depending on what the Americans are coming from, that was why I was saying that even in the negotiations with the United States over whether to bring troops to Nigeria or not, it was obvious that the Nigerian government had lost every initiative when it comes to protecting itself and protecting its citizens. Something had to be done. And so if it's going to take America, for instance, to come in to try to help, fine. But then again, like you indicated, America has a history, of getting involved in some of these interventions and leaving when they are most needed, and leaving the country in very big problem. And so the question you ask yourself is, what were the parameters under which the Americans came into Nigeria? What did they promise to the Nigerian government? What does the Nigerian government expect? And is the Nigerian government ready to play,
which is interesting, exactly, which is interesting. It's interesting. This is interesting that you asked that, because these are questions that everyday Nigerians are actually asking. We haven't had the opportunity to get an answer from the government regarding what the exchange is between America and Nigeria. So that's another conversation. But let's take a look at Nigeria now and how it plays into all the mess that's going on in the Middle East. Whether we like it or not, it still is an energies war. Nigeria is an oil-producing country. How can, and Ejike, this is for you, how can Nigeria take advantage of the circumstance currently, noting that it is a big oil-producing nation? Is this to our advantage anyway strategically?
It could be, but I've always said, the economics behind oil is simple. How many do you produce and what do you sell? So when Nigerians beat up their chest, they are oil producing. You have 230 million people, producing less than 2 million barrels. That math is easy. And when you look at, Nigeria makes less than $15 a barrel, because Nigerian oil producers are not indigenous oil producers. You still have the majors coming in there with their money. So they have to have a return on and return off before Nigeria even makes anything. It's different in the Middle East because they are invested in their production. That is why they have so much money and their margin is bigger. So the point is, if Nigeria is producing 2 million barrels, how many of those barrels are exported and who is buying it? So is Nigeria exporting 2 million barrels? No. If they export 100,000 barrels to America or whomever else, significantly and statistically, how does that compare to the volume of oil that are traded on a daily basis? I think Nigeria needs to start moving away from this where an oil producing country and thinking because that makes them might or a big nation. It is not. The reason the people in the Middle East have been successful is a small population country with a lot of revenue from oil. Qatar is about half a million Qataris. Okay? And they produce about the same amount of oil Nigeria does, with 200 and something million people. So that economics doesn't make sense. But going back to during the Gulf Wars, the first time Nigeria actually ever made good revenue from oil was when Obasanjo was there. I think it was $72 million or something, or 60, in 2007 or 8, or 7 before Obasanjo left. How has that helped the Nigerian economy? The Naira has fallen. Okay. When Obasanjo came in, excuse me, this is important because Nigerians need to start rethinking all this up and down, jumping up and down with oil. When Obasanjo came in, if you had 1 million Naira, you almost had 11,000 or 12,000.
Ejike,
look at it.
Ejike, my apologies.
So the point.
My apologies, but I have been told that we have run out of the allotted time for this conversation. We have been speaking for over 30 minutes, gentlemen. Well, I wanted to say thank you very much, Ejike, and of course, Chude. Chude, you said something very interesting. Food for thought, this is not a question. What if the American presence here in Nigeria is to stop the corrupt and illegal flight of minerals to China? Food for thought. Let's talk about that next time, gentlemen. Thank you very much.